The nightmare always began the same way. Blood. Everywhere blood. Soaking through white linen sheets, pooling on marble floors, staining his hands no matter how desperately he tried to wipe them clean. And in the center of it all, Isolde, his wife, dying. Her screams echoed through the vast chambers of Shadowmere, tearing through stone walls that had stood for centuries. The midwives worked frantically, their faces grim, their movements increasingly desperate. But Damaris Ravencroft, Duke of Shadowmere, could only stand frozen in the doorway, paralyzed by a terror he had not felt in 200 years. "Please," Isolde's voice, once so melodious, now broken and ragged. "Please, Damaris, save me." He had known what she was asking, the transformation. Vampire blood could heal mortal wounds, could pull the dying back from the abyss. But the curse, always the curse. His family's curse, ancient and merciless. A Ravencroft may truly love only once in their immortal lifetime. By the time he made his decision, it was too late. Isolde died at dawn, and the baby son died with her. Damaris woke with a sharp intake of breath, his body rigid in the massive four-poster bed. The silk sheets beneath him were dry, unstained. The room was silent, empty. No screams, no blood, just the same crushing loneliness that had been his constant companion for 8 years. He rose and moved to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain, just enough to see the darkness outside. 3 in the morning. The estate slept. The world slept. But he transformed into a vampire 2 centuries ago, and bound by his family's curse for 237 years remained awake. Always awake. Always alone. Always haunted by the choice he had made and the one he hadn't. In the distance beyond the manicured gardens and the ancient oak trees, Shadowmere's east wing stood dark and closed. Isolde's rooms exactly as she had left them. He could not bring himself to change a single detail. To do so would be to admit she was truly gone. Damaris pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. He had sworn on the night Isolde died that he would never love again. Never take that risk. Never watch another woman die because of his cursed bloodline. And yet here he was, about to take a wife, not for love, never for love, but for duty, for the dukedom that required an heir, for the council that demanded he fulfill his obligations to the Ravencroft line. This time would be different, he told himself. This time his heart would not be involved. This time he would remain the beast they called him. Cold, distant, untouchable. This time no one would die. 200 miles away, dawn broke over Thornfield Manor with violent beauty. Cordelia Ashcroft kicked her mare into a gallop, her dark hair streaming behind her like a battle flag, the morning mist parting before her like the sea before a ship's prow. The countryside flew past in streaks of green and gold, the thunder of hooves on soft earth drowning out everything else, the suffocating expectations, the whispered criticisms, the cage of propriety that grew tighter with each passing year. Out here, racing across her father's lands, with the wind tearing at her riding habit and the sun just cresting the horizon, she was free. Out here, she was not Miss Cordelia Ashcroft, disappointment to the Marquis of Thornfield. She was not the girl who had refused 5 perfectly suitable matches because each man had looked at her as if she were a prized mare to be purchased and broken. Out here, she was simply herself. Wild, uncontrolled, alive. She didn't see the groom running from the stables until it was too late. Didn't hear him shouting over the wind. Didn't know anything was wrong until she returned flushed and breathless to find her father waiting. Lord Edmund Ashcroft stood at the entrance to the manor, his face carved from granite, his hands clasped behind his back in that particular way that meant the storm was coming. "Father?" Cordelia dismounted, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. Mud on her skirts, hair escaping its pins, the kind of wild disarray that would send her mother into fits of despair. "My study, now!" The 2 words dropped like stones into still water. Cordelia's heart began to pound, though whether from the ride or from dread she couldn't say. She handed the reins to a stable boy and followed her father inside, tracking mud across the polished marble floors, each footstep a small rebellion. The study smelled of tobacco and old leather. Her father moved behind his massive mahogany desk and did not sit. That was the first sign this was serious. Lord Edmund only remained standing when he needed the height advantage, the psychological edge. "You cannot be serious," the words burst from Cordelia before her father could speak. He raised one eyebrow. "I have not yet said anything. You're going to tell me I must marry, that you've found someone willing to overlook my numerous faults and take me off your hands, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of autonomy you've decided to leave me." A muscle twitched in her father's jaw. Your melodrama serves no one, Cordelia, least of all yourself. Then prove me wrong. Instead, her father opened a drawer and withdrew a document. Official, legal, covered in seals and signatures. 3 weeks from today, you will marry Damaris Ravencroft, Duke of Shadowmere. The contracts have been signed. The settlement has been agreed upon. Your dowry has been received. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Cordelia's feet. Received, you've already accepted payment. The Duke was most generous. Generous. The word tasted like ash. You sold me. I arranged an advantageous match for my daughter. This is what families of our station do. This is how the world works. The Duke of Shadowmere. Cordelia's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. The man they call the Beast. The widower who locked himself away when his wife died 8 years ago. The Duke that no one has seen in daylight in living memory. Precisely why the match is so remarkable. The Duke has not taken a wife since his first Duchess had died. That he has chosen you, Wessie. Chosen. Cordelia laughed sharp and bitter. He purchased me. There's a difference, yet. Her father's expression hardened. You are 22 years old. You have refused every suitable gentleman who has shown interest. Lord Pemberton, the Earl of Winchester, even Sir Thomas Hartley, who was genuinely fond of you. Lord Pemberton speaks only of his hunting dogs. The Earl of Winchester has the intellectual capacity of a fence post, and Sir Thomas Hartley believes a woman exists solely to ornament his drawing room and produce heirs with maximum efficiency and minimum conversation. And what precisely do you believe a woman's purpose to be? The question hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Cordelia lifted her chin. I believe a woman should have some say in her own destiny, that she should be more than property exchanged between men for financial gain, that her mind, her heart, her very soul should matter as much as her ability to produce an heir. Those are dangerous thoughts, daughter, the kind that lead to spinsterhood and scandal. Better that than slavery dressed in silk. Her father's palm struck the desk with such force that ink bottles rattled. Enough, you will cease this hysterical display. The Duke of Shadowmere is one of the wealthiest men in England. His bloodline is ancient, his estates vast. Any woman would be honored. Then let one of those women have him. The Duke has chosen you. I have accepted on your behalf. The matter's settled. Cordelia stared at her father as if seeing him clearly for the first time. This man who claimed to act in her best interest while selling her future to a stranger. This man who valued title and wealth above his own daughter's happiness. And my wishes, she asked quietly, my feelings, do they count for nothing? Your wishes have been indulged far too long already. Your mother exhausted herself trying to mold you into something resembling a proper young lady. Every torn dress, every scraped knee, every mortifying display of unladylike behavior. She bore it all with patience I can only marvel at. But that patience has reached its limit. His voice softened slightly, though the steel remained beneath. You will marry the Duke of Shadowmere, Cordelia. You will become his Duchess. And you will finally learn what it means to be a woman of quality in this society. The words struck like physical blows. Cordelia felt her throat tighten, felt hot tears threaten to spill. But she would not cry. Not here. Not in front of this man who had just crushed every dream she had never quite dared to speak aloud. I will not do it, she whispered. You will, or I shall cut you off entirely. No inheritance, no home, no support of any kind. You will have nothing. The finality in his voice was absolute. You would truly do that. Cordelia's voice shook. Cast out your own daughter for refusing to marry a man she has never met. I would do what is necessary to prevent you from destroying yourself through sheer stubborn foolishness. Her father returned to his desk, sitting down with an air of weary dismissal. You have 3 weeks to prepare yourself. The Duke arrives next week to take tea with us. I suggest you use that time to adjust your expectations and your attitude. Damaris Ravencroft is not a man who tolerates disobedience. How perfectly splendid, Cordelia said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. A tyrant for a husband. Just what every woman dreams of. That will be quite enough. You are dismissed. Cordelia did not move. She stood there memorizing her father's face. This man who valued position above everything. This man who saw her as currency, not as a human being with thoughts and dreams and a beating heart. Then without another word, she turned and walked from the study, her spine rigid, her head high. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not yet. The following week passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like planning a funeral than a wedding. Cordelia's mother, Lady Margaret, fluttered through the manor like an anxious butterfly, obsessing over fabric samples and menu selections and whether the Duke preferred roses or peonies. Her voice had taken on a perpetual note of worry, as if Cordelia's very existence might cause some catastrophic social failure. Cordelia endured it all with a frozen politeness that alarmed her mother more than outright rebellion would have. She did not rage, did not weep, did not argue. She simply became very, very quiet. It was on the fifth day that her mother finally cornered her in the drawing room, dismissing the modiste with a gentle wave before turning to Cordelia with something close to desperation in her eyes. "You have been so very silent, my dear. Are you unwell?" "I am perfectly well, Mama. It is natural to feel nervous before one's wedding. I remember when I was to marry your father, I could scarcely eat for a week beforehand." Cordelia set down the teacup she had been holding. "Did you have a choice in the matter? When father asked for your hand, could you have refused him?" Her mother's hand stilled on the fabric samples. A complicated expression crossed her face, half memory, half regret. "That is a complicated question. It seems rather simple to me." Lady Margaret sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly beneath her perfectly tailored day dress. "My family was not wealthy, Cordelia. Your father's offer was generous. My parents were pleased. I was grateful for the opportunity to become a marchioness, to secure my family's future. So you had no choice either. I had limited options, and I learned over time that duty can become something warmer, that shared experiences can build a kind of affection." She reached for Cordelia's hand. "I pray you will find the same, my dear, that with patience and grace you might come to hold the Duke in esteem." Cordelia pulled her hand away gently but firmly. "And if I cannot, if I find myself trapped in a marriage devoid of warmth or understanding or anything remotely resembling happiness, then you will endure as women have always endured. You will find purpose in managing his household, in raising his children, in the thousand small satisfactions that make a life bearable. Bearable, not joyful, not fulfilling, merely bearable. The Duke arrives this afternoon," her mother continued softly, "at 3 o'clock to take tea with us. It would be nice to make a favorable impression." "Of course," Cordelia said hollowly. "Heaven forbid I disappoint my purchaser before the sale is finalized." "Cordelia." But she was already rising, already moving toward the door, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of her mother's resigned acceptance. Cordelia fled to the stables, to the only place that had ever truly been hers. Old Thomas, the head groom, looked up in surprise as she burst through the stable doors. "Miss Cordelia, saddle Tempest, quickly please." "But miss, you haven't a proper riding habit, and the Duke is expected within hours." "I don't care. Saddle her now." Something in her voice must have conveyed her desperation, because Thomas nodded and moved to comply. Within minutes, Cordelia was mounted, her day dress tucked up scandalously, her hair already coming loose from its careful arrangement. She kicked Tempest into a gallop before they had fully cleared the stable yard. The countryside flew past in streaks of green and shadow. The wind tore at her hair, her dress, her very skin, but she welcomed it. Out here, racing across fields with no destination in mind, she could almost pretend she was free. Almost pretend that in a few hours her life would not change irrevocably. Almost pretend that she would not soon belong to a man known throughout England as the Beast. But eventually even the swiftest horse must tire. Even the most desperate flight must end. Cordelia finally pulled Tempest to a halt atop a hill overlooking Thornfield Manor. Below, the estate spread out in all its elegant glory. Beautiful, proper, utterly suffocating. Somewhere in that house her wedding dress was being prepared. Invitations were being addressed. A future was being carefully constructed without any input from the woman who would have to live it. And in just a few hours she would meet the man who had purchased her. Damaris Ravencroft, Duke of Shadowmere, the Beast. Cordelia closed her eyes and allowed herself finally to weep. The Duke of Shadowmere arrived precisely at 3 o'clock. Cordelia watched from her bedroom window as an impressive black carriage bearing the Ravencroft coat of arms in silver rolled up the curved drive. Even the conveyance seemed ominous, she thought. All dark elegance and restrained power. A footman rushed to open the carriage door. Cordelia held her breath as a tall figure emerged. Damaris Ravencroft was not what she had expected. The rumors had painted him as some Gothic horror, a monster in human form. But the man who stood before Thornfield Manor, adjusting his black gloves with precise movements, was devastatingly handsome in a cold, severe way that made her breath catch despite herself. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled his impeccably tailored coat. His hair was dark as midnight, swept back from a face all sharp angles and aristocratic features. Even from this distance, she could see the pale perfection of his skin, the hard set of his jaw, the rigid line of his spine. He moved like a man accustomed to absolute command, every gesture controlled, deliberate, as if he had choreographed each movement centuries ago and perfected it through endless repetition. He looks rather like a marble statue, her mother observed from the doorway, making Cordelia jump. Cold and perfect and utterly unyielding. A statue would be preferable, Cordelia muttered. At least it would not expect conversation. Cordelia, her mother's voice held a warning. You promised you would be civil. I promised I would be present. Civility was never guaranteed. Before Lady Margaret could respond, a knock sounded at the door. A maid appeared, curtsying nervously. Begging your pardon, my lady, miss, but the Marquis requests your presence in the drawing room. The Duke has arrived. We shall be down directly, Lady Margaret said, then turned to Cordelia with something close to desperation in her eyes. Please, my dear, for your own sake, if not for mine, just try to make this easier on yourself. Cordelia looked at herself in the mirror, at the pale blue dress her mother had insisted upon, at her hair arranged in careful curls, at the picture of docile femininity she presented. She barely recognized herself. Very well, she said quietly. Let us go meet my purchaser. The drawing room had been prepared as though for royalty. Fresh flowers adorned every surface. The finest china had been brought out, delicate cakes and sandwiches arranged on silver trays. All this pageantry, Cordelia thought bitterly, for a man who has already paid for his prize. Her father stood near the fireplace, engaging the Duke in conversation about, of course, hunting. How perfectly ordinary, how wonderfully banal, as though they were not discussing the disposal of a human being. Ah, there you are, Lord Edmund said as Cordelia and her mother entered. Your Grace, may I present my wife, Lady Margaret, and my daughter, Miss Cordelia Ashcroft. The Duke turned. Cordelia forgot how to breathe. Up close, Damaris Ravencroft was even more imposing, but it was his eyes that truly unsettled her. Gray as a winter's storm and just as cold, they swept over her with the assessing gaze of a man examining livestock at market. She felt her spine stiffen, her chin lift, instinctive defiance rising like a shield. Miss Ashcroft? His voice was deep-cultured and utterly devoid of warmth. He bowed with perfect propriety. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Liar, she thought, you care nothing for me beyond what I represent. But aloud she said only, Your Grace, and executed a curtsy that was technically correct but lacked any warmth. His eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication he had registered her coldness. Please do sit, Lady Margaret said with forced cheerfulness, gesturing to the arrangement of furniture. I shall ring for tea. What followed was 30 minutes of exquisite torture. Her parents made polite conversation. The Duke responded with equal politeness, and Cordelia sat in frozen silence, her tea growing cold in her cup, watching this farce unfold. Miss Ashcroft has been looking forward to this visit, her father lied smoothly. Haven't you, my dear? With bated breath, Cordelia said, her tone so dry it could have started fires. The Duke's attention shifted fully to her for the first time. Those storm-gray eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. She met his gaze, steadily refusing to flinch. You do not seem pleased with this arrangement, he observed. The bluntness startled her. Would you be pleased, Your Grace, if you were being sold into matrimony with a complete stranger? Cordelia, her mother gasped, but the Duke held up one pale hand, his eyes never leaving Cordelia's face. A fair question. He leaned back in his chair with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his own power. However, I was not aware that sold was an accurate description. Your father and I have come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. How lovely for you both. How wonderful that you had any say in the matter at all. That is quite enough, her father said sharply. You will apologize to his Grace immediately. Will I? Cordelia turned to her father. And if I refuse, will you threaten to disown me again? Oh, but wait, you need not bother. I am already sold, am I not? The contract's drawn, the settlement agreed upon. What more can you possibly take from me? The silence that followed was deafening. Lady Margaret looked as though she might faint. Lord Edmund had gone an alarming shade of red, and the Duke was watching her with something that might have been interest if his expression had not been carved from ice. Perhaps, he said quietly, Miss Ashcroft and I might take a turn about the gardens. Alone. His tone made it clear this was not a request. I believe we have matters to discuss. I hardly think that would be appropriate, Lady Margaret protested weakly. We are to be married in less than 3 weeks, the Duke said. I believe propriety can be stretched to allow a brief walk. Your maid can follow at a discreet distance. It was not a question. Very well, her father said through clenched teeth. Cordelia, you will accompany his grace, and you will endeavor to behave with some measure of decorum. They walked in silence for several minutes, a maid trailing 20 paces behind. The gardens of Thornfield Manor were extensive, all manicured paths and careful landscaping. Beautiful and utterly controlled. Rather like my life, Cordelia thought bitterly. You may speak freely, the Duke said finally. I prefer honesty to pretty lies. How magnanimous of you. You are angry. What keen powers of observation you possess. He stopped walking and turned to face her directly. Miss Ashcroft, let us dispense with games. You do not wish to marry me. This is abundantly clear. However, the marriage will proceed regardless of your wishes or mine. Given that reality, would it not be more practical to approach this situation with some degree of civility? Civility, Cordelia repeated, something snapping inside her. You speak of civility while discussing a transaction that treats me as property. Do you have any idea how that feels to know you are worth nothing beyond your bloodline and your ability to produce heirs? For the first time, something flickered in those gray eyes, something that might have been surprise. I do, actually, he said quietly. I am also a commodity, Miss Ashcroft. I have wealth, a title, estates that must be maintained. Society expects me to remarry, to produce an heir, to continue the Ravencroft line. I have as little choice in this as you do. You have every choice. You could refuse. You could walk away. And what would you have me do? He took a step closer, and Cordelia fought the urge to retreat. Remain alone in that vast, empty house for the rest of my days. Watch the title and estates I have worked to maintain fall into decay because I was too selfish to do my duty. Duty. She spat the word like a curse. Everyone speaks of duty as though it absolves all sins, as though fulfilling one's obligations to society matters more than one's own happiness. The heart, he interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp, is a poor guide for making decisions that affect not only ourselves, but entire families and legacies. Spoken like a man who has never consulted his heart about anything. Spoken like a woman who has never had to consider anyone's needs beyond her own. The accusation stung precisely because it held a grain of truth, but Cordelia refused to flinch. You know nothing about me. I know enough. His voice had gone cold again. I know you are willful, defiant, and apparently determined to make both our lives miserable out of some misguided notion of feminine independence. And I know you are cold, arrogant, and utterly incapable of seeing women as anything beyond vessels for your precious heirs. They stood nearly nose to nose now, both breathing hard, eyes locked in mutual fury. In 3 weeks, the Duke said, his voice dangerously quiet, you will become my wife. You will be the Duchess of Shadowmere, and you will learn what that title requires. I will never obey you. We shall see. He stepped back, his expression shuddering once more into that impenetrable coldness. I shall return in 1 week to discuss final arrangements with your father. I suggest you use that time to reconcile yourself to your circumstances. Miss Ashcroft. He bowed perfectly proper and strode back toward the house, leaving Cordelia standing alone among the roses, her hands trembling with rage and something else she could not name. This was the man she would marry. This cold, imperious stranger who saw her as nothing more than a necessary inconvenience. Heaven above, she thought. What have I done to deserve such a fate? But the gardens offered no answer. And the roses, beautiful and carefully pruned, only reminded her that even nature itself was tamed and controlled within these walls, just as she would be. In 3 weeks, she would enter Shadowmere as its duchess, and she had no idea how she would survive it. The wedding took place on a gray morning in late October, under skies that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. Cordelia went through the ceremony as though observing it from a great distance. Some other woman standing at the altar in a dress of ivory silk. Some other woman speaking vows she did not mean to a man whose ring felt like a shackle on her finger. Damaris Ravencroft became her husband with the same cold precision he brought to everything else. His voice never wavered as he promised to honor and cherish her. His hand was steady as he slipped the wedding band onto her finger. And when the vicar pronounced them man and wife, his kiss was brief, perfunctory, and utterly devoid of feeling. It is done, he murmured against her lips, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Yes, Cordelia thought, it is done, and I am well and truly trapped. The wedding breakfast passed in a blur. Guests offered congratulations she did not want. Her mother wept. Her father looked satisfied like a man who had just concluded a profitable business transaction. The Duke, her husband now, heaven help her, stood beside her, throughout accepting well wishes with aristocratic grace. He introduced her to what seemed like half of England's nobility, and Cordelia smiled until her face ached and curtsied until her knees protested. "You play the role well," Damaris observed as they finally took their seats. "I had worried you might create a scene. Would that have been preferable, Your Grace?" "I would have preferred honesty, but I shall settle for civility in public. We may be as honest as we like in private." "How generous." His jaw tightened, the only sign her barbs were landing. "We leave for Shadowmere within the hour. I trust you are prepared." "As prepared as one can be to enter one's prison." "It is not a prison. It is one of the finest estates in England." "Then why," Cordelia asked quietly, "does everyone speak of it as though it were a tomb?" For just a moment something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or memory, but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. Because people enjoy dramatic stories, and a widower living alone in a vast house makes for excellent gossip. Before Cordelia could respond, her mother appeared at her elbow, pressing a small velvet pouch into her hands. "For the journey, darling, and remember what I told you. Patience, grace, duty." Cordelia embraced her mother, feeling the older woman's hands trembling slightly. "I will try, Mama." That is all anyone can ask. Her father's farewell was brusque, a kiss on the forehead, a firm nod. "Do your duty to your husband and your station. Make us proud." Proud, as if she were a soldier going to war rather than a bride going to her marriage bed. Then she was being handed into the black carriage, the same ominous conveyance that had delivered Damaris to Thornfield 3 weeks ago. The door closed. The driver called to the horses, and Thornfield Manor, the only home she had ever known, began to shrink in the distance. She was alone with her husband, her stranger, her captor. They traveled in silence for nearly an hour before Damaris spoke. "Shadowmere is approximately 4 hours from here. The estate encompasses over 10,000 acres. There are tenant farms, villages, extensive grounds." "How lovely," he continued as if she had not spoken. "As Duchess, you will have certain responsibilities. The household staff will require direction. There are social obligations, charitable works expected of your position." "I am well aware of what is expected of a Duchess, Your Grace." "Damaris." She turned to look at him, startled. "What?" "My name is Damaris. You are my wife. You may use it. Would you prefer I did?" He considered this with the same serious attention he seemed to apply to everything. "I would prefer we not spend the next 40 years addressing each other with such formality." "So yes, I would prefer it." "Very well, Damaris." The name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate for this stranger beside her. "And you may call me Cordelia, I suppose. Since you own me now, you might as well use my Christian name." "I do not own you." "Do you not? The law says otherwise." "Upon marriage, I became your property in every way that matters. My money, my possessions, even my own body, all legally yours now. That is not how I view our arrangement. How convenient for you that you may choose how to view a situation that benefits you entirely." His hands tightened on his knees. "You are determined to be miserable. I am determined to be honest." "You said you preferred it, did you not?" "I am beginning to reconsider that position." Despite herself, Cordelia felt her lips twitch. Was that almost amusement? In the midst of her fury and despair, had this cold man actually said something nearly amusing? But before she could dwell on it, the carriage rounded a bend, and Shadowmere came into view. Cordelia's breath caught in her throat. The estate rose from the landscape like something from a Gothic novel. All dark stone and imposing towers surrounded by grounds that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Ancient trees lined the drive, their branches reaching toward each other overhead like grasping fingers. Even the sky seemed darker here, the clouds heavier. "Good heavens," Cordelia breathed, genuine shock breaking through her carefully maintained hostility. "It is enormous." "Yes," Damaris's voice held neither pride nor apology, simple statement of fact. "The main house contains over 200 rooms. There are also the east and west wings, though we keep the east wing closed. 200 rooms." She could not fathom it. "For one person, for two now." He glanced at her. "You need not sound so horrified. We shall spend most of our time in the family wing, a mere 30 rooms or so." The carriage drew to a halt before the main entrance, where what seemed like an entire regiment of servants had assembled, all in perfect formation, and all watching their new mistress with undisguised curiosity. Damaris descended first, then turned to offer his hand to Cordelia. She took it because she must, stepping down onto gravel that crunched beneath her slippers, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. Your Grace. An elderly man, the butler, presumably stepped forward with a deep bow. May I be the first to welcome you to Shadowmere? I am Dawson. I have served the Ravencroft family for 43 years, and I am at your complete disposal. Thank you, Dawson. Cordelia managed, hoping her voice sounded more gracious than she felt. Mrs. Blackwood will show you to your chambers, Damaris said, indicating a stern-looking woman in housekeeper's black. You may wish to rest before dinner. The journey can be taxing. Where will you be? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why should she care where he went? I have a state business requiring attention. I shall see you at dinner. 8 o'clock. Do not be late. It was not a request. Cordelia watched him stride away, already issuing orders to a man who must have been his steward, already absorbed in matters that had nothing to do with her. This way, Your Grace, Mrs. Blackwood said, her voice not unkind but not warm either, reserved, watchful. If you will follow me. The Duchess's chambers were like everything else in this house, enormous and intimidating. The bedroom alone was larger than the entire parlor at Thornfield. A massive four-poster bed dominated the space, its curtains a deep emerald green that matched the wallpaper. Heavy furniture, wardrobe, dressing table, several chairs filled the room without making it feel cramped. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking grounds that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Your dressing room is through there. Mrs. Blackwood indicated a door to the left. Your private sitting room through there. She paused. The Duke's chambers are through the connecting door. Cordelia followed the housekeeper's gaze to a door she had not initially noticed. Heavy oak, currently locked. I see. The door remains locked unless, Mrs. Blackwood trailed off delicately, unless he wishes to exercise his marital rights, Cordelia finished flatly. Mrs. Blackwood's expression remained neutral. Quite so, Your Grace. Your trunks will arrive within the hour. A maid will be assigned to help you dress for dinner. Is there anything you require immediately? Yes, Cordelia wanted to scream. I require my freedom. I require a way out of this beautiful nightmare. But aloud she said only, No thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. That will be all. The housekeeper curtsied and withdrew, leaving Cordelia alone in chambers that could have swallowed her whole. She moved to the French doors, opening them despite the chill in the air, stepping out onto the balcony. From here she could see the full extent of the Shadowmere estate, endless gardens giving way to parkland, parkland giving way to forest. Beautiful, manicured, controlled, like everything else in her new life. A knock at the connecting door pulled her back inside. Enter, she called, expecting Mrs. Blackwood. Instead, Damaris stepped through, still in his traveling clothes, his expression unreadable. I wanted to ensure you were settling in. How very considerate. He moved further into the room, and somehow his presence made the enormous space feel smaller. Cordelia, I know this is not what you wanted, but it is what we have, and I would prefer we not spend our lives as enemies. What would you prefer? A partnership, perhaps. Mutual respect, if not affection. Civility at minimum. You ask a great deal. I ask for basic human decency between two people bound together by law and circumstance. He moved to the window, staring out at his lands. This house has been cold and silent for too long. I do not wish to make it a battlefield as well. Something in his voice, a weariness, a loneliness, made Cordelia pause, made her really look at him for the first time since the wedding. He looked tired, genuinely deeply tired. Not just physically, but tired in a way that suggested years of carrying burdens alone. Why did you choose me? She asked quietly. Of all the women available, why me specifically? He turned to face her, and for once his expression was open, unguarded. Because you were alive. Because 6 months ago at the Henderson Ball, I saw you laughing with your friends, arguing with some young lord about politics, being so vibrantly, fiercely yourself. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. And I thought perhaps someone with that much life in them might bring some warmth back to this place. That is all. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Cordelia alone with the uncomfortable realization that her husband might be less monster and more man than she had wanted to believe, which somehow made everything infinitely more complicated. Dinner that evening was an exercise in careful civility. They sat at a dining table that could have easily seated 30, an absurd expanse of polished mahogany between them. Silent footmen appeared and disappeared like phantoms, serving course after course of food that Cordelia barely tasted. The estate is beautiful, she offered, because someone had to break the oppressive silence. Thank you. The gardens were designed by Capability Brown. The house itself dates back to the 15th century, though it has been extensively renovated over the years. More silence. Cordelia pushed food around her plate. Tomorrow, if you wish, Mrs. Blackwood can give you a tour of the main house. Help you become familiar with your new home. That would be helpful. Thank you. The conversation felt like walking on ice. One wrong step, and they would both fall through. There is one rule, Damaris said suddenly, his voice careful. One area of the house that must remain off limits. Cordelia looked up, meeting his eyes across that ridiculous expanse of table. The East Wing. Yes, those were my first wife's rooms. I have not changed them. I would prefer they remain undisturbed. A shrine, then, to the woman he had loved and lost. I understand, Cordelia said softly. And she did. Grief was not something to be reasoned with or rushed. I shall respect your wishes. Something in his expression softened slightly. Thank you. After dinner, he escorted her back to her chambers. They stood awkwardly in the doorway, neither quite knowing how to end the evening. Good night, Cordelia. Good night, Damaris. He hesitated as if he might say something more, but instead he simply bowed and withdrew to his own rooms. Cordelia closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. This was her life now, this vast, cold house, this complicated, damaged man, this marriage that was duty and arrangement and nothing more. She changed into her nightgown, dismissed the maid, and stood at the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. Somewhere in this enormous estate and rooms she would never enter, a dead woman's memory lived on. Perfect, preserved, beloved. And Cordelia was expected to exist in her shadow, to be a duchess but not a wife, a companion but not a love. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. 3 weeks ago she had been free. Now she was the beast's bride, and the cage had never felt so small. But as she turned away from the window, as she climbed into the enormous bed and pulled the coverlets around her, one thought whispered through her mind, he chose me because I was alive. Perhaps, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, that meant something after all. Perhaps there was hope yet, even here, even now, even in the beautiful tomb called Shadowmere. The first week at Shadowmere passed in a strange twilight existence. Cordelia woke each day to find the sun already high, her body slowly adjusting to the rhythms of a household that came alive only after dark. The servants moved through the corridors like ghosts during daylight hours, quiet and efficient, preparing for the evening when their master would finally emerge from his chambers. She learned quickly that Damaris Ravencroft was a creature of the night. He rose at dusk, took his meals after dark, conducted all estate business by candlelight, and he never not once stepped foot outside his rooms while the sun still touched the sky. His Grace has always kept nocturnal hours, Mrs. Blackwood explained one afternoon as she showed Cordelia through the main house. The housekeeper's voice was carefully neutral, but Cordelia heard the unspoken warning beneath, "Do not ask why." But Cordelia had already begun to notice other peculiarities. The way Damaris moved through rooms with unsettling grace, as if gravity held him differently than it held other men. The way his skin remained pale, no matter how many fires burned in the hearth. The way he never seemed to eat, only pushed food around his plate while watching her with those storm-gray eyes. The way he sometimes went very, very still, in a manner that made him seem less like a living man and more like a statue carved from marble. She told herself she was imagining things, that grief could change a person, make them strange and distant, that 8 years of isolation could reshape anyone into something cold and otherworldly. But late at night, lying alone in her enormous bed, listening to the sounds of the ancient house settling around her, Cordelia wondered what secrets Shadowmere held, and whether she truly wanted to know. On the 8th day of her residence, Cordelia took control of the household. She had spent the previous week observing, learning, mapping the intricate web of servants and responsibilities that kept the vast estate running. Now she called Mrs. Blackwood to her sitting room and requested the account books. The housekeeper's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your Grace, most duchesses prefer to leave such matters to—" "I am not most duchesses." Cordelia met the older woman's gaze steadily. "My mother trained me to manage a household, Mrs. Blackwood. I know how to read ledgers. I know what is reasonable and what is wasteful. And I know when servants are taking advantage of an absent mistress." A flash of something respect perhaps crossed Mrs. Blackwood's face. "Very well, Your Grace. I shall have them sent up immediately." By evening, Cordelia had identified 3 areas where costs could be reduced without sacrificing quality. She had reorganized the cleaning schedule to be more efficient, and she had discovered that the wine merchant had been overcharging by nearly 30%. When Damaris emerged from his chambers that night, he found Cordelia in his study surrounded by ledgers making notes in her precise handwriting. "What are you doing?" He stood in the doorway perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "Saving you approximately £400 per quarter. You're welcome." He moved closer, looking over her shoulder at the accounts spread across his desk. His presence was suddenly overwhelming: cold air, an expensive cologne, and something else she could not quite name. "The wine merchant has been cheating you," Cordelia continued, trying to ignore the way her heart had begun to race. "And your housekeeper, while loyal, has been allowing the maids to use far too much beeswax. We can reduce that by half without any noticeable difference in... You did all this in one day." She looked up at him, confused by the strange note in his voice. "Is that a problem?" "No," he picked up one of the ledgers, scanning her corrections. "No, it is not a problem. It is impressive. You sound surprised." "I am." He set the ledger down carefully. "Most women of your station would not trouble themselves with such mundane matters." "I am not most women, as I keep trying to tell everyone." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Was that almost a smile indeed?" he said softly. "You are not." He turned to leave, then paused. "What me for dinner tonight? The small dining room, not that absurd hall. I find I grow tired of shouting across 30 feet of mahogany to hold a conversation." It was not quite a request, but it was closer than anything he had offered before. "Very well," Cordelia said. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. After he left, Cordelia sat very still, staring at the accounts, but no longer seeing them. Something had shifted, some small crack in the wall between them, and she was not entirely certain how she felt about it. Dinner in the small dining room was a different experience entirely. The space was intimate, a round table that seated only 6, a fire crackling in the hearth, candles casting warm shadows on wood-paneled walls. Cordelia could actually see Damaris's face clearly, could read the subtle shifts in his expression. "You played beautifully," she said, referring to the piano music she had heard drifting through the halls earlier that evening. He looked up, startled. "You heard that? I thought you were in the East Gardens." "I was returning. The Brahms wasn't it." "You know Brahms?" "I had an excellent music tutor, though I'm afraid my own playing is mediocre at best. I could never quite master the passion required." She took a sip of wine. "How long have you played?" A pause. "Too long to be casual." "Many years." "You're very skilled. You must have studied extensively." "I have had considerable time to practice." There it was again, that strange hesitation, as if he were choosing his words very carefully, editing out some larger truth. Cordelia decided not to push. "Not yet." "Tell me about the estate," she said instead. "The tenant farms. I would like to visit them, meet the families, understand what they need." And so he told her about the 5 villages on Ravencroft land, about the farmers who had worked the same fields for generations, about the careful balance between tradition and innovation that kept the estate prosperous. As he spoke, his voice lost some of its careful control. He gestured with his hands, leaned forward, became almost animated. And Cordelia realized with a start that he was passionate about this place, that beneath the cold exterior, he cared deeply about the land and the people who depended on it. "You love it," she said softly. "Shadowmere, you truly love it." He went still again, that unnatural stillness that made her skin prickle. "Yes," he said finally. "It is all I have left." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning she could not quite grasp. "Not all," Cordelia heard herself say. "You have me now, for whatever that is worth." His eyes met hers across the table, and for just a moment she saw something flicker in their gray depths. Surprise, perhaps, or hope. But then his expression shuddered once more. "Indeed, finish your wine. I want to show you something." He led her through corridors she had not yet explored, up a winding staircase, through a door that opened onto the rooftop. The night air was cold and clear. Stars blazed overhead, more stars than Cordelia had ever seen in her life, undimmed by city lights. "Oh," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "I come here sometimes," Damaris said quietly, "when the house feels too small, when the walls close in." They stood side by side, looking up at the vast expanse of sky, and for the first time since arriving at Shadowmere, Cordelia felt something like peace. "Do you know the constellations?" she asked. "I do." He pointed to a cluster of stars, Orion, and their Cassiopeia, and that bright one, Venus. Not a star, a planet. Technically, yes, but it shines like a star, does it not? They talked for an hour about astronomy and mathematics and the nature of infinity, and Cordelia discovered that beneath his cold exterior, Damaris Ravencroft had a mind as sharp and curious as her own. When they finally returned inside, chilled and exhilarated, something between them had fundamentally changed. They were no longer just strangers bound by legal contract. They were becoming something else, something more dangerous. The storm came 3 days later. Cordelia woke in the afternoon to the sound of wind howling around the eaves and rain lashing against the windows. By evening, it had grown into a tempest that shook the very foundations of the house. The gardens, Damaris said at dinner, setting down his wineglass with a sharp click. The ornamental fountain in the east garden, the statues will topple in this wind. Should we send servants? No, it's too dangerous. I'll go myself. Then I'm coming with you. He looked at her as if she had suggested something absurd. Absolutely not. The storm is fierce. And you think I'm made of sponge sugar I've ridden through worse. Cordelia was already standing. If you're going out there, so am I. Cordelia, partners, you said, or was that just pretty words? For a moment, she thought he would argue, but instead, something like respect flickered across his face. Very well, but we'll need proper coats. Mrs. Blackwood appeared with heavy cloaks and sturdy boots clucking disapprovingly but helping them prepare nonetheless. Cordelia struggled with the unfamiliar fastenings until Damaris wordlessly knelt before her, adjusting the boots with surprising gentleness. I am capable of managing my own footwear, she protested. I know, but these are tricky and we're in rather a hurry. Something about the sight of him kneeling at her feet, his dark hair falling forward as he worked, made her breath catch. Then they were outside, the storm hitting them like a physical force. Rain soaked through her cloak within seconds. Wind tore at her hair, but Damaris grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, and together they ran toward the gardens. The fountain stood in the center of a formal parterre, an elaborate marble creation featuring dolphins and nymphs and classical gods. The wind had already loosened two of the smaller statues, and they rocked dangerously on their pedestals. Damaris immediately set to work securing the largest pieces. Cordelia joined him, grabbing hold of a marble dolphin that was threatening to topple. Careful, he shouted over the wind. That piece is heavier than it. The dolphin shifted suddenly, its weight pulling Cordelia forward. She would have fallen directly into the overflowing fountain if Damaris had not caught her, his arms coming around her waist, steadying her against him. For a moment they stood frozen, pressed together, his arms solid and surprisingly warm despite the cold rain, her back against his chest, both of them breathing hard. Thank you, she gasped. His arms tightened fractionally. You must be more careful. The wretched dolphin was not cooperating. And then impossible, ridiculous. He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound startled out of him, his whole face transforming with genuine amusement. And Cordelia, soaked to the skin and shivering in her husband's arms in the middle of a storm, found herself laughing too. We are completely mad, she managed between giggles, standing in a deluge wrestling with decorative sea creatures. Attempting to save them from the indignity of toppling over, he added, his laughter subsiding into a grin that made him look years younger. What is happening here? A voice called. Several groundskeepers were emerging from the house, clearly having just realized their duke was outside in the storm. Nothing that cannot wait until morning, Damaris called back. Then more quietly to Cordelia, come, before we both catch our deaths. They hurried back inside, leaving puddles in their wake. Mrs. Blackwood appeared immediately, rushing them toward their respective chambers with orders for hot baths and dry clothes. An hour later, bathed and dressed in a warm wrapper, Cordelia sat before the fire in her sitting room, a cup of tea warming her hands. She should have felt miserable, should have been cursing this house, this marriage, this entire situation. Instead, she found herself remembering the sound of Damaris's laughter, the way his face had transformed, the strength of his arms around her. A knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. Cordelia, may I enter? Yes. Damaris appeared in his dressing gown, hair still damp from his own bath, looking more human than she had ever seen him. I wanted to ensure you were well. That was foolish of me, dragging you out into the storm. You did not drag me. I chose to come. Still, I should not have allowed it. He moved closer to the fire. That was reckless. It was also rather wonderful, Cordelia said quietly. We laughed together. When was the last time you laughed like that? His expression grew distant, sad. I cannot remember. She set down her teacup. Tell me about her, your first wife. If we are to be partners, should I not know about the woman who came before me? He was silent for so long she thought he would refuse. But then he moved to the chair opposite hers and sat his movements heavy with weariness. Isolde, he said finally. Her name was Isolde. She was everything a duchess should be. Beautiful. Accomplished. Perfect in every way. Did you love her? I... He paused, his brow furrowing as if the question had never occurred to him before. I cared for her greatly. Our marriage was arranged, but we were compatible. She never questioned, never challenged, never demanded more than I could give. Unlike you, Cordelia heard in the silence. How did she die? His jaw tightened. Childbirth. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. The physicians warned us. But she was determined to give me an heir. She believed it was her duty. There is that word again, duty. Yes, his voice had gone flat. Hard. She did her duty, and it killed her. Cordelia leaned forward, her voice gentle. That was not your fault. Was it not? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw 8 years of guilt and self-recrimination. I was her husband. I should have protected her. You cannot protect everyone from everything. Women die in childbirth. It is tragic and terrible, but it is not anyone's fault. It simply happens. She begged me, he said so quietly she almost missed it. At the end, when she knew she was dying, she begged me to save her. Cordelia's heart clenched. How could you have saved her? He looked away, jaw working. There were ways, methods I could have tried, but I was afraid, and so I did nothing. I watched her die and I did nothing. The anguish in his voice was devastating. Cordelia rose and crossed to him, kneeling before his chair, taking his cold hands in hers. You made the choice you thought was right. You cannot blame yourself for that. You cannot carry this guilt forever. Can I not? He looked down at her, his eyes bleak. I have carried it for 8 years. It has become part of me. You would be a man who allows himself to live again, to feel again. She paused. To let go of the past. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You are nothing like her. Isolde never challenged me, never argued, never looked at me the way you do. And how do I look at you? As if you see me, not the Duke, not the title, but the man beneath. His voice dropped to a whisper, and that terrifies me, Cordelia, because I have spent 8 years hiding that man away. And you are beginning to thaw the frost. They were very close now, his thumb still tracing the line of her jaw, her hand still holding his, the firelight casting warm shadows across both their faces. Would that be so terrible, she whispered. To thaw. I do not know, I have been frozen for so long. And then, as if drawn by forces neither could name, they moved together. The kiss was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was heat and hunger and desperate need. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shoulders. They kissed like drowning people gasping for air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damaris pressed his forehead against hers. This is dangerous, he murmured. Yes. We should stop. Yes. Neither of them moved. Then wordlessly he stood and pulled her with him, led her through the connecting door to his chambers. And there in the darkness of his room, they discovered each other with a tenderness neither had expected. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in his bed, Cordelia felt a profound shift. This was real. Whatever else this marriage was arranged, forced political, what had just happened between them was real. Cordelia, Damaris said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I know, she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she knew. Only that something fundamental had changed between them. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in 8 years, Damaris did not dream of Isolde's death. The following days established a new pattern. Cordelia managed the household during the day, visiting tenant farms and earning the respect of the staff. Mrs. Blackwood, in particular, seemed to warm to her. You're good for this house, the housekeeper said one afternoon. It has been too quiet for too long. You bring life. In the evenings, Cordelia and Damaris dined together, talked, played chess, read in companionable silence, and at night they came together with increasing passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies, sharing warmth in the darkness. On the 12th night, Cordelia gathered her courage. I want to show you something, she said, rising from her chair in the library. What is it? My poetry. You asked before. I would like to share it with you now. She saw surprise flicker across his face, followed by something that looked almost like pleasure. I would be honored, she returned with a single page carefully transcribed. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to him. He read in silence, his expression unreadable. Cordelia felt her heart hammering, felt ridiculous anxiety over what he might think. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright. "This is beautiful, Cordelia. You're merely being kind." "I am not." He stood crossing to where she stood, the poem still in his hand. "This is genuinely, truly beautiful. You have real talent. It's just a silly hobby." "It is not silly." He was very close now, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You should not dismiss your own gifts so readily. This is part of who you are, and it is extraordinary." They stood in the firelight, the poetry between them, the air suddenly charged with electricity. "Cordelia," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I find myself thinking about you constantly, about how you laugh, about the way you argue about crop rotation as though your life depends on it, about—" He stopped abruptly as Cordelia swayed slightly, one hand going to her temple. "Are you unwell?" "Just a headache. I've had them all day. I think perhaps I should—" But before she could finish, the room tilted alarmingly, and then she was falling into darkness. The vision struck her like a wave. She was in a bedroom, larger, darker than her own. A woman lay in an enormous bed, her face pale and drawn. Isolde. Cordelia knew it instantly. The scene unfolded before her, Isolde dying, begging Damaris to save her. But more than that, Cordelia felt his emotions. The paralyzing doubt, the terrible fear that what he felt for Isolde was not the kind of love required. The agonizing choice made too late. And then something else. A flash of understanding. Words in Latin, a curse. A Ravencroft may truly love only once. The vision shattered. Cordelia gasped, her eyes flying open. She was cradled in Damaris's arms. He was carrying her swiftly through corridors, his face tight with worry. "What happened?" she managed. "You fainted. I am taking you to your chamber." "No." She gripped his coat. "Damaris, I saw something. Your wife, and something about a curse." He went very still. "That is not possible." "Nevertheless, it happened." She looked up at him. "What are you—" For a long moment, she thought he would refuse to answer, would retreat behind his walls and leave her with questions unanswered. But instead, he carried her the rest of the way to her chambers and set her carefully on the sofa. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the darkness. "My family has been cursed for 237 years, he said finally. "I was transformed into a vampire 2 centuries ago. The curse states that a Ravencroft may truly love only once in their immortal lifetime." Vampire, the word hung in the air like smoke. Cordelia should have been terrified, should have screamed, done anything but what she did. Instead, she felt a strange sense of recognition, as if some part of her had known all along. "The curse," she said slowly. "Isolde was not your true love. That is why you hesitated. I cared for her. I thought it was enough. But when the moment came," his voice broke. "I doubted, and she died. So you locked yourself away, convinced yourself you could never love again. Because the curse is clear. One true love. If I love a second time, that love will die in agony." Cordelia stood slowly, moving toward him. "That vision I had, it was not just memory. It was your emotions. Your fear. I felt what you felt. That should not be possible. And yet it happened." She stopped in front of him. "What if it means something? What if there is a connection between us? Or what if it means nothing? What if I allow myself to love you and you die?" His voice was raw. "Could you forgive me then? I am not her." Cordelia cupped his face between her hands. "I am strong, and I am choosing right now to trust you. Can you not do the same? You do not understand what you are asking." "Then help me understand. Either you want me or you do not. Either you are willing to risk something real or you are content to spend eternity alone by your end. I want—" The words seemed torn from him. "God help me, Cordelia, I want you. Every moment we spend together makes the ice crack a little more, and I am afraid that when it finally shatters completely, I will drown us both." "Then let it shatter," she whispered. "Let it break." She kissed him, and Damaris's control finally snapping, kissed her back. It was hunger and heat and desperate need. They moved together toward the bed, shedding clothes, losing themselves in each other. But as his lips moved to her throat, as passion overtook them both, Cordelia felt something sharp graze her skin. She gasped. Damaris froze. His eyes had changed darker, more intense, and when he spoke, she caught a glimpse of elongated canines. Fangs. "I am sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I lost control for a moment. But Cordelia, driven by instinct she did not fully understand, reached up and deliberately drew her finger across a pin on the discarded bodice of her dress. Blood welled up bright and red. "Cordelia, what are you?" The scent hit him like a physical blow. His eyes went black, his fangs fully extended. Every muscle in his body tensed. "No," he managed through gritted teeth. "Get away, I cannot control." But it was too late. His control shattered. He grabbed her wrist, bringing the bleeding finger to his lips. And as his tongue touched her blood, something happened. A wave of energy exploded outward from where they touched. The air crackled. The room seemed to shimmer. And suddenly Cordelia could feel him, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. Every thought, every feeling, every shred of loneliness and longing and desperate, terrified love. It crashed over her like a tsunami, and she knew with absolute certainty that he felt her too. Her strength, her determination, her fierce heart, the blood bond, it had formed between them. Rare, powerful, irreversible. Damaris released her wrist as if burned, stumbling backward, his eyes wide with shock. "What have we done?" he whispered. Through the bone, Cordelia felt his emotions as clearly as her own. The terror, the wonder, the overwhelming realization that he was falling in love with her. "We have bound ourselves together," she said softly, "in a way that goes beyond marriage. Blood bonds are rare. They require true compatibility, deep connection, the potential for real love. Yes, but the curse, if I love you, perhaps the bond is stronger than the curse." She moved closer. "Or perhaps you have been wrong all along about what the curse truly means. I do not understand. You will. We will figure it out together." She took his hand. "Can you feel it?" "What I feel for you." Through the bond, she let him sense it, the growing warmth, the affection, the beginning of love. "Cordelia," his voice broke, "I know you are afraid. I can feel it. But I can also feel what you will not admit. Do not say it. You are falling in love with me, despite the curse, despite everything." She stepped closer. "And I think I might be falling in love with you too." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I will not let the curse take you," he whispered fiercely. "I will find a way to break it. I know, I can feel it." They stood there in the firelight, bound now by something far deeper than marriage vows. Bound by blood and magic and the terrifying possibility of real love. "What do we do now?" Damaris asked finally. "Now," Cordelia said, "we figure out the truth about your curse. We discover what this bond means, and we stop being afraid." "I have been afraid for so long. Then let me be brave for both of us." She kissed him softly. "Until you remember how." Outside, storm clouds gathered. Thunder rumbled. But inside Shadowmere, for the first time in 8 years, there was warmth. There was hope. There was the beginning of something that might be strong enough to break a 200-year-old curse. The blood bond changed everything. In the weeks that followed, Cordelia learned to navigate this strange new connection. It was not constant, not an invasion of every private thought. Rather, it was like a door that could be opened or closed at will. Sometimes managing household accounts, she would feel sudden warmth and know Damaris was thinking of her. Sometimes late at night, she would sense his loneliness and go to him. And sometimes when they were together, the bond would flare bright and overwhelming, and they would lose themselves in each other. But Damaris remained cautious. He would allow himself only so much before pulling away, before fear returned. "The curse is still real," he would say. "The bond does not negate it. I cannot risk losing you. You are not losing me by loving me. You are losing me by holding back." But he could not seem to help himself. 200 years of solitude had taught him to guard his heart too well. Until the morning, everything changed. Cordelia woke feeling strange. Not ill precisely, but different. The smell of breakfast cooking, usually pleasant, made her stomach turn violently. She barely made it to the basin before retching. Mrs. Blackwood found her 20 minutes later, pale and trembling. "Your Grace, shall I send for the physician?" "No. I am certain it is just—" Cordelia stopped. Her mind raced, calculating dates. The wedding was late October. She and Damaris had first been intimate in early November before the blood bond formed. It was now early December. "Oh, Mrs. Blackwood," she said slowly, "you were here when the first Duchess carried the Duke's child. What were her symptoms in the early weeks?" The housekeeper's expression shifted. Sickness in the mornings, exhaustion, heightened sense of smell. Cordelia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "I think I might be with child." Mrs. Blackwood's eyes widened. We must tell his grace immediately. No, Cordelia's response was sharp. What yet? Not until I am certain. Promise me. The housekeeper hesitated, then nodded. As you wish, your grace. 3 weeks later, when the physician confirmed what Cordelia already knew, she could hide it no longer. She found Damaris in his study reviewing estate correspondence by candlelight. He looked up as she entered, his face softening. Cordelia, I was just thinking about you. Through the bond, she felt his pleasure. I wondered if you might enjoy a ride tonight. I am pregnant. The words fell like stones. Damaris went absolutely, utterly still. Even his breathing stopped. What did you say? I am with child. The physician confirmed it this afternoon. 7 weeks along. He stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. His face had gone bone white. No, this cannot. It can and it has. Cordelia moved toward him. Damaris, I know this is unexpected. Do you understand what this means, the danger? Of course I understand, but women bear children every day. Isolde had the best physicians in England. The words burst from him. She had every comfort, and she died anyway. She died out of screaming while I stood there helpless. Through the potting, Cordelia felt it, the tidal wave of terror, of traumatic memory. I am not Isolde, she said firmly. You could die just as she did. He turned away, his whole body trembling. I cannot watch that again. I cannot lose you that way. You will not lose me. You cannot know that, he spun back. Women die in childbirth every day, and you are carrying the child of a vampire. Who knows what complications might arise? Then we will face them together. No, his voice went cold. You will stay in bed, complete bed rest starting immediately. I will summon every physician in England. Excuse me, Cordelia felt her own temper rising. You will not dictate terms to me like I am a prisoner. I am trying to protect you. You are trying to control me because you are afraid. Of course I am afraid. For the first time since she had known him, she saw tears in his eyes. Do you understand what you mean to me? What losing you would... He stopped abruptly. Through the bond, Cordelia felt it. The truth he had been denying. He loved her, truly, deeply, completely loved her. And the curse hung over them like a guillotine. Damaris, she said softly, I know you are frightened, but I will not live the next 7 months as a prisoner. I am strong. I am healthy. And I will not allow fear to steal my life. I cannot lose you. His voice broke. Please, just stay safe. Let me protect you. She wanted to rage at him, but through the bond she felt the depth of his trauma. I will be careful, she said finally. I will listen to the physicians, but I will not stop living out of fear of dying. That is no life at all. She left him there alone in his study, drowning in memories and terror. Over the following weeks, Damaris became increasingly controlling. He insisted on accompanying her everywhere, hired additional physicians, forbade her from riding or doing anything involving exertion. The household grew tense under the weight of his barely contained panic, and Cordelia, feeling the life growing inside her, began to feel like a bird in a gilded cage. You cannot forbid me from walking in my own gardens, she said one evening. The paths are uneven. You could trip. I could also trip walking across this room. Shall you carry me everywhere? If necessary. Cordelia set down her fork carefully. This has to stop. This is not protection. This is imprisonment. I am keeping you safe. You are suffocating me. Better suffocated than dead. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Through the mind, Cordelia felt his emotions raw and bleeding. But she also felt something darker. He was not just trying to protect her. He was trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to prevent death through sheer force of will, and it was breaking them both. I need air, she said quietly. I am going for a walk. Cordelia, alone. She left before he could stop her, walking quickly through the corridors out into the night. The November air was cold and sharp. She walked without direction through the gardens, past the fountain, into the wild parkland beyond. It was only when she reached the cliff edge that she realized how far she had come. The cliff overlooked Shadowmere's eastern border, a dramatic drop to a river below. At night, with clouds obscuring the moon, it was a void of darkness. Cordelia stood at the edge, her hand on her stomach, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of her fear. What if Damaris was right? What if she was not strong enough? What if this child destroyed her? What if she did and left Damaris alone again, more broken than before? Step away from the edge. She spun at the sound of his voice. Damaris stood 10 feet behind her, his face ghostly pale, his eyes wild. How did you find me? The bond. I felt your distress. He moved closer slowly. Please, Cordelia, step away from the edge. You think I would jump? She laughed bitterly. Is that what you think of me? I think you are in pain. I think I have driven you to this. His voice broke. Please, just step away. She did not move. You cannot control this. You cannot prevent death through fear. At some point, you have to trust. In me, in fate, in something beyond your own desperate need for control. I cannot just stand by and watch you risk your life. Then what? Spend the next 7 months locked away, never moving, just existing in fear. She took a step toward him. Is that the life you want for me, for our child? I want you alive. I am alive right now in this moment. She pressed her hands to her stomach. But you are so focused on preventing my death that you are stealing my life. Because I love you. The words exploded from him, raw and desperate. Because I have fallen completely, irrevocably in love with you, and the thought of losing you destroys me. Because for 200 years I have been dead inside, and you brought me back to life, and I cannot survive going back to that darkness. Cordelia stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I know the curse, Damaris continued. One true love, and you are mine. I know it with every fiber of my being, which means that if I continue to love you, the curse will kill you. You are cursed by fear, not magic, Cordelia said fiercely. The curse is real. Isolde died because she was not your true love. The words burst from Cordelia with sudden certainty. Do you not see? You doubted. You hesitated. Because some part of you knew. And that doubt killed her. Damaris went very still. What are you saying? Perhaps the curse was never about punishment. Perhaps it was about ensuring Ravencrofts only bind themselves to their true loves. Perhaps it was protection. Oh, but I loved Isolde too. Did you truly, or did you care for her? Feel affection, have duty toward her? Cordelia moved closer. What you feel for me, is it the same? Through the bond, she opened herself completely. Let him feel the depth of what she felt for him, and felt him respond. Felt the enormity of his love for her, so different from what he had described feeling for Isolde. This was not duty, not affection. This was true love. Oh God, Damaris whispered. What if you are right? What if all these years I have been punishing myself for a love that was never meant to be? Then perhaps the curse will not harm me. Perhaps I am safe precisely because I am your true love. Or perhaps it will kill you anyway. He took her hand, pulling her away from the cliff edge. I cannot risk it. Then we find another way. We research the curse. We discover the truth. She gripped his hand tightly. But we do it together, as partners. Please, Damaris, trust me. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I am so afraid, he whispered. I know. I can feel it. But let me be afraid with you. Let me be strong when you cannot be. They stood there on the cliff's edge, two people bound by blood and magic and terrifying love. What do? He asked finally. We start by going home. And then Cordelia pulled back to look at him. Then we go to the one place you have been avoiding. We go to the East Wing, to Isolde's rooms, and we find the truth. They opened the East Wing the next morning. Damaris had not set foot in those rooms since Isolde's death. For 8 years they had remained sealed, preserved at exactly as she had left them. Now with Cordelia at his side, he turned the key in the lock. The air that greeted them was stale and heavy. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that fell through the window as Cordelia pulled back the curtains. It was like stepping into a tomb. Isolde's dresses still hung in the wardrobe. Her hairbrush still sat on the vanity. Her books still lay on the nightstand. It is like she just stepped out, Cordelia said softly. I could not bear to change anything. Cordelia took his hand. You were not erasing her by moving forward. You were honoring her by continuing to live. They searched methodically. Through personal effects, correspondence, her diary. It was in the diary that they found it. Isolde's handwriting, elegant and careful. I find I am afraid. Not just of the pain, but afraid that I am not enough. That I do not love him the way a wife should. I admire him. I respect him. But passion, the consuming love the poets speak of, I do not think I feel such things. Perhaps I am incapable. He is kind to me, considerate, but I sense a distance between us, as if we are both playing roles rather than truly being married. The curse frightens him. His family's curse, only one true love. He is afraid I am not that love, and I am afraid he is right. Damaris's hands shook as he read. She knew, he whispered. She knew it was not real. And she was afraid too, Cordelia said gently. He turned to the final entry. Perhaps this is how I can finally give Damaris what he needs. Perhaps in death I can free him to find his true love. If the curse takes me, at least he will know. I hope she is everything I was not. I hope she challenges him, makes him laugh, makes him feel. I hope she saves him from the darkness. Tears streamed down Damaris's face. She wanted me to find you. She wanted me to be happy. She released you, Cordelia said. Even in her death, she was thinking of your future. They continued searching and found tucked into the desk drawer an old leather-bound book, the Ravencroft family grimoire. Damaris opened it with trembling hands. The curse was detailed in faded ink written in Latin. Damaris translated, "Let it be known that Marcus Ravencroft is hereby cursed, as are all his descendants. A Ravencroft may truly love only once in their immortal existence. Should they transform their one true love, that love will endure eternal. Should they transform any other, that person shall suffer and die. Choose wisely. Choose truly." Cordelia read it carefully. It does not say you can only love once. It says you can only safely transform your one true love. I transform no one. I refuse to transform Isolde. Because you knew she was not your true love. The curse was protecting you both. Cordelia placed her hand over his. I am not in danger from your love. I am protected by it. But what if I am wrong? What if, feel it? Cordelia commanded, opening the bond fully. This is not duty, not companionship. This is the kind of love that changes everything. You know it. Through the bond, their emotions mingled, his love and her love becoming indistinguishable. You are my true love, Damaris whispered. You are the one the curse has been waiting for. Yes, and I am carrying our child, and I am going to survive, because we are meant to be. He kissed her then there in Isolde's rooms. But it was not desperate or frightened. This was hope. This was certainty. This was the beginning of healing. Thank you, he whispered to the empty room. Thank you, Isolde. And somewhere in the dust motes, Cordelia could have sworn she felt a presence. Gentle, approving, at peace. The pregnancy progressed. Damaris, armed now with the truth, slowly learned to release his stranglehold of fear. He still worried, but he learned to trust, to breathe, to allow Cordelia her autonomy while supporting her. They walked the gardens each evening, talked about the future, made plans for the nursery. Cordelia thrived. Her body adapted with surprising ease. She remained active, managing the household, living fully. The baby is strong, the physician said, unusually strong. I suspect the supernatural element may actually be protecting you both. It seemed the curse worked both ways. True love protected in all things. But as her due date approached, Damaris's old fears began to resurface. Through the bond, Cordelia felt every spike of terror. I am not her, she reminded him again and again. And this time, you are not alone. The labor began on a cold January night, 2 weeks earlier than expected. Cordelia woke to pains, sharp, insistent, radiating through her body. She gasped, pressing her hand to her swollen stomach. Through the connecting door, she heard Damaris's immediate response. He burst into her chambers, already knowing through the bond. It is time, she managed. His face went pale. For a moment, panic threatened. Then he took a breath, squared his shoulders. I am sending for the physicians. I will not leave you. Whatever happens, we face it together. Whatever happens, she agreed. The labor was long, difficult. The baby fought its way into the world with determined force. Cordelia bore it with fierce determination, Damaris at her side throughout. He held her hand, whispered encouragement, used the blood bond to send waves of strength when her own began to falter. Hours passed, the pain became unbearable. She felt her strength waning, felt darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. Something is wrong, the physician said quietly. She is losing too much blood. Through the haze, Cordelia heard the words, felt Damaris's surge of terror. No, he said fiercely. This is not how this ends. He moved to her side. Cordelia, look at me. She forced her eyes open. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You faced down a vampire. You broke a curse. You are not giving up now. Tired, she managed. I know, but our daughter needs you, and I need you. So you are going to fight. Just a little longer. Can you do that? Through the bond, he poured everything into her. All his strength, all his love, all his determination. And Cordelia, drawing on reserves she did not know she possessed, pushed. The baby came in a rush of blood and victory. A cry split the air, strong, healthy, furious at being born. A girl, the physician announced. A healthy baby girl. But Cordelia barely heard. The blood loss was too severe. She was slipping away. Cordelia, Damaris's voice sharp with terror. No, stay with me. The mother is hemorrhaging, a physician said urgently. Move, Damaris commanded. Before anyone could stop him, he bit his own wrist. Vampire blood welled up dark and potent. He pressed his wrist to Cordelia's lips. Drink, now. Instinctively, she obeyed. The blood touched her tongue cold and sharp. Power flooded through her. Ancient. Overwhelming. The vampire blood raced through her veins, finding torn vessels, damaged tissues, and healing them with supernatural efficiency. But it did not transform her. The blood bond, the true love, changed the rules. Instead of making her vampire, it simply healed, saved her life without taking her humanity. Color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing steadied. The hemorrhaging stopped. The physicians stared in shock. But Damaris was watching Cordelia's eyes flutter open. Did it work? She whispered. The baby. A nurse brought the infant to her. A tiny, perfect baby girl wrapped in blankets, her eyes, when they opened, a startling violet gray. Hope, Cordelia breathed, taking her daughter into her arms. Her name is Hope. Damaris knelt beside the bed, one hand cradling his daughter's head, the other gripping Cordelia's hand. You did it, he whispered. You survived. You both survived. Through the bond, Cordelia felt his emotions, relief and joy and love so profound it brought tears to her eyes. We survived, she corrected, all three of us. They stayed like that for a long moment, bathed in candlelight. Then slowly Damaris became aware of something changing. A warmth on his skin, a sensation he had not felt in over 200 years. He looked toward the window. Dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight were beginning to touch the horizon. And for the first time since being cursed, the sunlight did not burn. He stood slowly, moving to the window, tended his hand into the shaft of light. His skin did not smoke, did not blister, did not burn. The curse, he whispered, it is broken. Cordelia smiled, exhausted and radiant. True love breaks all curses. Did you not know? He laughed, bright and free and filled with wonder. Come here. I just gave birth. I am not moving anywhere. So he brought the sunrise to her, opened the curtains, fully flooding the room with golden light. And there in the dawn, the vampire duke, who had lived in darkness for 2 centuries, stood in sunlight, holding his wife's hand, watching their daughter sleep. Hope, he said softly. Her name is perfect, because she is exactly that. Our hope, our new beginning. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, Cordelia stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching Hope toddle through the gardens below, chasing butterflies with delighted shrieks. Damaris followed close behind, his face transformed by laughter. The east wing had been opened, Isolde's rooms converted into a beautiful nursery. Her portrait hung in the gallery, honored but no longer haunting. Shadowmere had been transformed. Windows open throughout, gardens blooming, servants singing, life and warmth everywhere. Damaris had learned to walk in daylight, learned to laugh freely, learned to trust in happiness. He looked up now, seeing Cordelia on the balcony, and smiled. Through the bond, she felt his love, constant, steady, infinite. She sent her own love back. Mama, Hope called, waving her arms. Come play. I am coming, darling. That evening, after Hope had been put to bed, Cordelia and Damaris stood together in the library, the room where they had first truly seen each other. I wrote something for you, Cordelia said, handing him a piece of paper. He read the poem slowly. Once I lived in shadow, bound by fear and chain, sold to serve another's will, to bear another's name, but in the darkness found. I light in winter, found the spring. In the beast's cold heart, I found the man, and learned what love could bring. For love is not a cage at all, though first it seemed the same. But freedom found in choosing when we choose to play the game. I chose to see beyond the curse, beyond the fear and pain. I chose to love the wounded heart, and love transformed the chain. Now shadow turns to sunlight, and the beast has learned to smile. The curse is broken, hope is born, and life is worth the while. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. It is beautiful and true, all of it. He pulled her into his arms. I was dead for 200 years, he said quietly, and then you arrived. Fierce and defiant and so full of life, and you woke me up. We brought each other back, Cordelia corrected. I was just as trapped as you were, just in a different kind of cage. And now we are both free. Yes, now we are both free. Outside, the sun set over Shadowmere, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Inside, the house glowed with warmth and light. The beast of Shadowmere was gone. In his place stood Damaris Ravencroft, husband, father, man who had learned that love was worth every risk. And beside him stood Cordelia, wife, mother, Woman who had taught him that courage was choosing to love despite fear. Together they had rewritten their story. Together they had broken the curse. Together they had found home. And that was the greatest magic of all.